I was 68 years old when I watched my daughter-in-law try to poison my Christmas Eve wine. The crystal glass sparkled under the dining room lights as she poured the expensive red wine, adding something extra when she thought no one was looking. But my son Michael saw everything. Without a word, he smoothly switched our glasses while helping set the table. 10 minutes later, as our family gathered for the holiday toast, Sarah suddenly clutched her stomach and ran from the room, her designer heels clicking desperately against the hardwood floors. The bathroom door slammed, followed by sounds no one at a formal dinner wants to hear. Michael leaned close to me, his voice quiet but firm. "Dad, what she put in your wine wasn't meant to kill you, just to make you lose control in front of everyone. But don't worry. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to reveal something that will change our family forever." Before we continue, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone who should have loved you, if you've ever suspected that a smile hid darkness, leave a like on this video and subscribe to hear what happened next. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story will show you exactly how karma works when we least expect it. My name is Robert Wilson, and I spent 40 years building custom homes in our small town. Not mansions or luxury estates, but solid houses where working families could build their lives. After losing my wife Catherine to cancer 15 years ago, I poured everything into raising Michael alone, teaching him the value of honest work and true character. I thought those lessons had taken root. But when he married Sarah 3 years ago, something changed. She brought designer tastes and social ambitions into our simple life, slowly turning my son against everything we once believed in. That Christmas Eve, watching her run from the table in panic, I didn't know that my wine glass held more than just her attempt at public humiliation. It held the key to a secret she'd been hiding for months, a truth about inheritance and identity that would shatter her carefully constructed facade. My son's quiet act of protection wasn't just about switching drinks. It was the first move in a game of justice that would teach everyone at that table the true meaning of family loyalty. But to understand how we reached this moment of poisoned wine and whispered warnings, we need to go back. Back to the day my son first brought home the woman who thought she could destroy me with a single glass of Christmas wine. I built my first house when I was just 23, fresh out of trade school with calloused hands and big dreams. Catherine stood beside me on that empty lot, her nurse's uniform still dusty from her hospital shift, as we mapped out the foundation in the warm spring air. "Build it strong," she said, squeezing my hand, "because one day all your houses will carry the Wilson name." She was right, as she always was. Over 40 years, Wilson Custom Homes became known for quality craftsmanship and honest pricing. Not the biggest company in town, but one that working families trusted. Catherine and I raised Michael in a modest house I built myself, teaching him the value of creating something real with your own hands. Every Sunday she would pack picnic lunches and we would visit my construction sites as a family. Michael would collect spare nails, pretending they were treasure, while Catherine sketched design ideas in her little blue notebook. She had an eye for the small details that turned houses into homes, the window seats and reading nooks that made our clients' eyes light up. Even during her hospital shifts, she would talk to patients about their dream homes, bringing me their stories and hopes to build into every foundation I laid. One memory stands clearer than all others, bright as sunlight through new windows. Michael was 12, and I was teaching him to frame walls on a small project behind our house. Catherine brought out lemonade in mason jars, the ice cubes clinking like tiny bells. The summer air smelled of fresh-cut lumber and her garden roses. "Show me again, Dad," Michael said, his small hands wrapped around the hammer, determination in his eyes. I guided his arms, teaching him the rhythm of driving nails true and straight. Catherine took a photo of that moment, both of us focused on the task, sawdust in our hair, matching smiles on our faces. That picture still sits on my workbench, though the colors have faded like so many things since she left us. The cancer came quickly 3 years later, aggressive and unstoppable. Catherine faced it with the same quiet strength she brought to everything, making me promise to finish raising our son with both love and backbone. "He'll need both," she whispered in those final days, "because the world has a way of testing what we're made of." The years after losing her were a dance of work and single parenthood. I threw myself into building houses, each one a tribute to Catherine's memory. Michael grew into a fine young man, studying architecture in college, understanding both the science and soul of creating homes. On quiet evenings, I would sit in my workshop, running my hands over the smooth wood of unfinished projects, talking to Catherine's photo about our son's achievements. The silence of widowhood never quite goes away, but I filled it with the sound of hammers and saws, with the satisfaction of helping other families build their dreams. My clients became friends, inviting me to their housewarmings, proudly showing me how they'd turned my structures into living, breathing homes. I watched their children grow up in houses I'd built, saw their Christmas lights shine through windows I'd installed, heard their laughter echo off walls I'd raised. It wasn't the same as having Catherine beside me, but it was a different kind of fullness. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm of work and quiet evenings. I had my routine: coffee at sunrise, checking job sites during the day, dinner at my workbench while reviewing blueprints. Sometimes Michael would join me, now working at a prestigious architecture firm downtown, our conversations flowing easily between design theories and family memories. We were different men, him in his tailored suits and me in my work boots, but we understood each other in the way that people who build things do. I thought we had constructed something solid and lasting, this father-son relationship built on respect and shared values. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday evening in September, Michael called with excitement in his voice. "Dad, I met someone special. Her name is Sarah Anderson. She's an interior designer for luxury homes. Can we come over for dinner tomorrow night? I really want you to meet her." I said yes, of course, eager to share in my son's happiness. I didn't know then that I was about to meet the woman who would try to demolish everything we had built, using my son as her wrecking ball. Sarah Anderson arrived at my front door that Wednesday evening like a magazine advertisement come to life. Her silk blouse probably cost more than my best work truck, her manicured nails had never touched a tool, and her smile was practiced perfect, like something learned in front of a mirror. "Mr. Wilson," she purred, air-kissing my cheek with expensive perfume that smelled nothing like Catherine's simple rose water. "Michael has told me so much about your quaint custom homes." The way she hesitated before the word quaint made it sound like she was describing something found at a yard sale. I had spent the afternoon making Catherine's special lasagna recipe, setting the table with our best dishes, the ones we saved for Christmas and birthdays. Michael seemed different already, watching Sarah's reaction to everything instead of relaxing in his childhood home. He kept adjusting his tie, something he'd never bothered with during family dinners before. Sarah walked through my living room like she was conducting an inspection, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors I'd installed with my own hands. "Such interesting choices," she murmured, running a finger along my handmade bookshelf. "Though I suppose it has a certain rustic charm. Michael mentioned you're still actively working? At your age?" The question carried a subtle sting, like a paper cut you don't notice until it starts to bleed. The changes in Michael became more noticeable as dinner progressed. When I started telling the story of his first construction project, a treehouse we built together when he was 10, he quickly changed the subject to Sarah's recent interior design spread in Luxury Living magazine. "Dad's stories can get a bit provincial," he said, using a word I'd never heard him use before. Sarah dominated the conversation, dropping names of exclusive clients and describing the multimillion-dollar homes she'd decorated. "Of course," she said, sipping my best wine like it was cheap punch. "In my world, we focus on homes that make a real statement. Not that there's anything wrong with building starter homes." She turned to Michael with a practiced smile. "Darling, have you told your father about the country club membership? The connections there could really help him upgrade his business model." My son, who once proudly helped me install drywall during his summer breaks, looked almost embarrassed when he glanced at my work-worn hands. The lasagna grew cold on their plates as they discussed renovation plans for Michael's downtown condo, Sarah describing changes that would erase every trace of the comfortable space he'd created. Just before dessert, Sarah excused herself to use the bathroom. I heard her opening cabinets and drawers, not even trying to be subtle about her snooping. When she returned, her questions took a sharper turn. "This property must be quite valuable now with the new development nearby. Have you thought about selling? Michael mentioned you're not much for retirement planning." Her words were honey-sweet, but her eyes were calculating, like a real estate agent sizing up a potential listing. Michael jumped in before I could respond. "Dad's not interested in selling, Sarah. This is our family home." But the way he said it sounded uncertain, as if he was already seeing the house through her eyes instead of his heart. As they prepared to leave, Sarah paused in the doorway, her smile never reaching her eyes. "We should discuss renovating this place, Mr. Wilson. I have so many ideas that could bring it into this century. Maybe make it more presentable for when Michael and I start having children." The way she said presentable made my home of 40 years sound like something that needed to be hidden away, like an embarrassing old relative. After they left, I sat in my workshop, running my hands over the smooth oak of a cradle I'd been building, hoping one day it would hold my grandchildren. The wood still smelled fresh and honest, but something else hung in the air now, an unsettling scent like expensive perfume covering decay. Michael had left his favorite coffee mug unwashed in the sink, something he'd never done before. It sat there like a small sign that things were already changing, that my son was slowly being rebuilt according to someone else's blueprints. In the quiet of my workshop, surrounded by the tools and materials that had helped me build hundreds of homes, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah Anderson wasn't just redecorating Michael's condo. She was systematically demolishing every solid thing I'd ever built in my son's life, starting with his respect for honest work and simple values. The first incident happened at Michael's birthday dinner in October. I had spent weeks crafting a special gift in my workshop, a hand-carved desk made from oak salvaged from his childhood treehouse. When I arrived at the expensive restaurant Sarah had chosen, carrying the carefully wrapped desk, the hostess stopped me at the door. "Sir, we can't have deliveries through the main entrance." Before I could explain, Sarah appeared in her designer dress, her smile tight with embarrassment. "Oh, Mr. Wilson, we thought we mentioned, this is a rather exclusive venue. Perhaps you could bring that rustic piece another time?" Michael stood behind her, not meeting my eyes, adjusting his silk tie. "Dad, maybe save it for when we visit you next?" I drove home with the desk rattling in my truck bed, telling myself they were just trying to maintain the restaurant standards. That night, I sat in my workshop, running my hands over the carved wood that held so many memories, trying to convince myself that good intentions sometimes came wrapped in painful words. The second cut came during Thanksgiving. For 30 years, we'd hosted the holiday in our family home, using Catherine's recipes and her hand-painted autumn decorations. But Sarah announced they'd be having dinner at her parents' country club instead. "It's really more appropriate for networking," she said during a quick phone call. "Michael needs to mingle with the right people." When I offered to bring Catherine's famous apple pie, Sarah's laugh felt like ice down my back. "Oh no, the club has a French pastry chef. We can't have homemade desserts." Michael added quickly, "Maybe we can do a small family dinner another time, Dad?" I spent Thanksgiving evening alone, eating a turkey sandwich at my workbench, staring at Catherine's empty chair. I told myself they were young, building their own traditions. But Catherine's voice in my memory whispered that traditions aren't built by erasing foundations. That night, I noticed Michael had removed our family photos from his social media, replacing them with glossy shots of his new country club life. The final wound was the deepest. I had stopped by Michael's office to surprise him with lunch, something we used to do regularly. I carried a brown paper bag with his favorite sandwiches from the deli near my current job site. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw my work boots and paint-spotted jeans. "Sir, deliveries are through the back." Before I could respond, I heard Sarah's voice from around the corner, talking to what sounded like potential clients. Of course, Michael comes from a more modest background, but he's completely transformed himself. You'd never know his father is just a local handyman. My son's laugh, agreeing with her words, felt like a nail through my heart. Dad's old school. Still thinks success means calloused hands. I set the lunch bag on the receptionist's desk and walked out, my work boots suddenly feeling heavy as concrete. In my truck, I found myself talking to Catherine's memory. "Maybe we raised him wrong, honey. Maybe we should have taught him to value appearances over substance." But I knew what she would say, that empty shine never outlasts solid construction. That evening, I stood in my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always brought me peace. On my phone, social media showed pictures of Michael and Sarah at charity galas and wine tastings, his arm around her waist, both of them glittering with a polish that made my world look dull in comparison. The photos had captions about upgrading life and leaving the past behind. My son, who once spent weekends helping me frame houses, now posed in tailored suits beside people who thought manual labor was something to escape. The distance between us wasn't measured in miles, but in the growing shame he seemed to feel about his roots. I touched the rough wood of the unfinished cradle I'd been saving for their future children, wondering if they'd even want something so rustic in their polished new world. The workshop suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, like a house after the family has moved out, leaving only echoes of what used to be home. The invitation to host Christmas Eve dinner at my house came as a surprise, delivered by Michael during an unexpected visit in early December. "Sarah thinks it's time to embrace some simpler traditions," he said, standing in my workshop doorway. "She wants to understand where I came from." My heart lifted like a sunrise after a long night. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing, pulling out Catherine's old decorations from the attic, the glass ornaments we'd collected over 30 years of marriage still wrapped in her careful newspaper bundles. The house filled with the scent of pine from the real Christmas tree, just like the ones Michael and I used to cut together when he was young. I cleaned every corner, fixed every squeaky floorboard, and even reupholstered Catherine's old dining room chairs. In my workshop, I spent evening after evening crafting special gifts. A jewelry box for Sarah made from polished maple, and for Michael, a restored version of his childhood rocking horse for their future children. When Sarah called to discuss the dinner menu, her voice carried an unusual warmth that made me dare to hope. "We'll bring the wine," she said. "Something special to celebrate family." The first hint that something was wrong came 3 days before Christmas, when I stopped by Michael's office to confirm dinner details. The elevator was broken, so I took the stairs, my work boots quiet on the carpeted steps. As I reached Michael's floor, I heard Sarah's voice floating through the stairwell door, left slightly ajar. "It's perfect, really? Christmas Eve at his shabby little house. Everyone will see exactly why you needed to reinvent yourself." My hand froze on the door handle. "The wine is the key," she continued, speaking to someone I couldn't see. "Just a few drops in his glass, and he'll make such a spectacle of himself. Your father's business partners will understand why we need to distance ourselves from certain family elements." A man's laugh joined hers, but it wasn't Michael's. "Brilliant plan, sis. Nothing like a drunken display to justify cutting ties. And with the old man's reputation ruined, no one will believe him when you and Michael announce the changes in January." I backed away from the door, my heart pounding against my ribs like a hammer on wood. Changes in January? What changes? That evening, I sat in my workshop, staring at the gifts I'd made, wondering if I'd imagined the whole conversation. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about someone else. I picked up my phone a dozen times to call Michael, but what would I say? That I'd overheard his wife plotting something with wine at Christmas dinner? That I was worried about mysterious changes? He'd think his old father was becoming paranoid. Besides, the way Sarah had laughed, it reminded me of Catherine's warning about people who smile while holding daggers. The next day, more guests were added to the dinner list. Sarah's parents, her brother, and 3 of her father's business partners, all arriving in time for the evening wine toast. "It's tradition," Sarah explained sweetly during her final check-in call. "Everyone raises a glass at exactly 8 o'clock. It's so charming to do it in such a rustic setting this year." Each word felt like a splinter working its way under my skin. Christmas Eve morning dawned clear and cold. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by Catherine's old recipes spread across the counter, the ingredients for her special holiday dishes laid out like soldiers ready for battle. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, everything perfect and waiting. The gifts sat wrapped under the tree, my simple handmade offerings among the expensive packages Sarah had sent over. Through the window, I watched the sun rise over the frost-covered yard where Michael had once built snowmen and played catch. In a few hours, this room would be full of people, crystal wine glasses would sparkle under the lights, and my son's wife would, what? Make me look like a fool? Destroy something I didn't even know was at risk? I touched Catherine's old recipe cards, her handwriting faded but still clear, and made a decision. In my workshop, I found an empty wine glass and practiced lifting it, pretending to drink while letting the liquid touch only my closed lips. Catherine had taught me that trick during her hospital days, when we had to toast with apple juice at staff parties. Sometimes, her voice whispered in my memory, the best defense is letting others think they've won. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through my workshop windows, I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Expensive engines purred like satisfied cats. Designer shoes clicked on my front porch. Sarah's laugh, high and artificial, floated through the December air. I straightened my best flannel shirt, the one Catherine had given me our last Christmas together, and touched the small photo of her I kept in my pocket. "Watch over us tonight, honey," I whispered. "Something's not right with our boy." I walked toward the house, my work boots silent on the snow-dusted path, ready to play my part in whatever scene Sarah had scripted for this Christmas Eve. But in my heart, a voice that sounded like Catherine's kept whispering, "Watch the wine, Robert, watch the wine." My living room had never felt so foreign, filled with expensive perfumes and designer suits that made my handmade furniture look like museum pieces from a forgotten time. Sarah moved through the space like a conductor, directing her carefully chosen guests to strategic positions. Her parents, dressed in matching cashmere sweaters, occupied my old leather armchair like it was a temporary inconvenience. Her brother lounged against the fireplace mantel, barely concealing his smirk as he eyed the family photos I'd carefully arranged. The business partners, 3 men in suits worth more than my truck, clustered near the Christmas tree, their polite smiles never reaching their eyes. Michael hovered between groups, wearing a new silk tie, looking more like a stranger than my son. The air felt thick with anticipation, like the moment before a controlled demolition. At precisely 7:45, Sarah announced it was time for the wine toast. She disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a crystal decanter of deep red wine that caught the light like liquid rubies. The glasses she'd brought were delicate things, probably worth a week's wages each. I watched her pour with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment, noticed her slight hesitation over my glass, the extra tilt of her wrist that lasted a heartbeat too long. But what I didn't expect was Michael's reaction. My son, setting out the cheese platter I'd prepared, saw everything. His face flickered with an emotion I couldn't read, and then as he helped distribute the glasses, he made a smooth, practiced movement. My glass and Sarah's switched positions with the casual grace of someone adjusting table settings. 8 o'clock arrived with the soft chime of the mantel clock Catherine had loved. Sarah raised her glass, now unknowingly holding the wine she'd prepared for me. "A toast," she announced, her voice carrying that practiced warmth that never quite thawed. "To family, to new beginnings, and to leaving certain, outdated elements in the past." Her father nodded approvingly, her mother's smile turned predatory, and her brother's smirk widened. The business partners shifted, clearly aware they were about to witness something planned. Michael stood beside me, his hand steady on his own glass, watching his wife with an unreadable expression. Sarah lifted her glass to her lips, taking a generous sip of the wine meant for my humiliation. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then her eyes widened. Her perfectly painted lips parted in surprise. A strange sound escaped her throat, and suddenly she was running, designer heels clicking desperately against my hardwood floors as she fled toward the bathroom. The violent sounds that followed made several guests wince. Her brother's smirk vanished. Her parents exchanged alarmed looks. The business partners began a strategic retreat toward their coats. Michael touched my shoulder, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "The wine wasn't meant to make you sick, Dad. It was supposed to make you lose control, act drunk, embarrass yourself in front of everyone. But that's not even the worst part. Tomorrow morning at breakfast, they plan to announce that they're selling your company's client list to Sarah's father's construction firm. They've been copying your contracts, your designs, everything. They thought if they ruined your reputation tonight, no one would believe you when you objected to the sale." Each word felt like a nail being driven into my heart. The bathroom door slammed again, followed by more retching. Sarah's mother rushed to help her daughter, shooting me a suspicious glance as if I had somehow orchestrated this. Her father was already on his phone, probably calling their lawyer. The business partners had vanished like smoke. Through it all, I stood silent, the untouched wine in my glass catching the Christmas lights like blood. Michael squeezed my shoulder one more time. "There's more, Dad. So much more. But right now, just know that not everyone at this table forgot what you taught them about loyalty." I looked around my living room at Catherine's decorations tainted by this attempted ambush, at the handmade gifts under the tree that now seemed naive in their honesty, at Sarah's brother frantically texting someone about the failed plan. The sound of my daughter-in-law being violently ill provided a strange percussion to the Christmas carols still playing softly in the background. The warmth I'd felt seeing my house full of people for the holidays hardened into something cold and unforgiving, like concrete setting on a winter day. In that moment, watching the chaos unfold, I realized that some betrayals can't be framed over or painted to look prettier. Some foundation cracks run too deep to repair. Sarah had tried to poison more than my wine. She tried to poison everything I'd spent a lifetime building. But she'd forgotten the first rule of construction. Always check your materials before you build. And tomorrow morning, when Michael revealed the rest of what he'd discovered, she would learn that karma, like a well-built house, always returns to its foundation. After the guests fled and Sarah remained locked in the bathroom, I retreated to my workshop, my sanctuary of sawdust and honest wood. The Christmas lights still twinkled through the window, mocking the warmth they were meant to represent. Michael had gone to help his wife, promising to return in the morning with the full story of whatever darkness he'd uncovered. My hands moved automatically to an old oak chest in the corner, the one Catherine had always called our memory box. Inside, beneath decades of family photos and children's drawings, my fingers found a leather portfolio I hadn't opened in years. The leather was buttersoft with age, the corners worn smooth from Catherine's habit of running her fingers along the edges while she thought. I brought it to my workbench, the same bench where I'd taught Michael to sandwood until it felt like silk. Inside, protected by a clear plastic sleeve, was a document that made my heart stop. The original incorporation papers for Wilson Custom Homes, dated 30 years ago. But it wasn't just any business document. Catherine, with her nurse's attention to detail and her quiet wisdom, had structured our company in a way I'd almost forgotten. The ownership was split, 51% in my name, 49% in a trust she'd established before her death. A trust that could only be accessed under specific conditions, with a letter attached in her familiar handwriting, for Robert to be opened if our son ever forgets his foundation. My hands trembled as I opened the sealed envelope, yellowed with time but intact. Catherine's words flowed across the page like a voice from the past. My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, our Michael has lost his way. I always feared that success might make him forget where he came from, that someone might try to use him to destroy what we built. This trust holds 49% of our company, but more importantly, it holds all the original patents and design copyrights for your custom home innovations. The special framing technique you developed, the energy-saving layout designs, everything that makes a Wilson home unique. It's all protected here. No one can legally sell or transfer these without the trust's approval. And you, my love, are the sole trustee. I spread the papers across my workbench, reading through legal language that suddenly felt like poetry. Every contract in our company's history was bound by these patents. Every design, including the one Sarah's father thought he could simply buy and steal, was protected. The client list they'd copied? Useless without the proprietary building methods that made our home special. In the distance, I heard a car start, probably Sarah finally leaving with her shattered dignity. The bathroom would need a thorough cleaning, but that could wait. Right now, my mind was clear for the first time in months, seeing the full picture of their failed plan. They had thought they were buying a simple construction company, stealing basic designs and client relationships. They didn't know that Catherine, who spent her last months watching our son change under the influence of successful friends, had created an unbreakable legal shield around our life's work. Tomorrow, when Michael revealed whatever else he'd discovered, we would have more than just defensive weapons. We would have the power to protect everything they thought they could steal. I carefully returned the documents to their leather home, but kept Catherine's letter in my pocket, close to my heart where it belonged. The Christmas lights outside seemed different now, less mocking, more like Catherine's own eyes twinkling with her special kind of wisdom. My wife had given me one final gift, the power to protect not just our company but our son's soul. The papers in that portfolio weren't just legal documents. They were a mother's love transformed into corporate armor, and I was finally ready to use them exactly as she had intended. As the first light of morning painted my workshop in shades of gold, I called Tom Harrison, my oldest friend and the lawyer who had helped Catherine set up our business 3 decades ago. Come to the house now, I said simply. Catherine's letter is open. Those words were all he needed. We discussed this possibility years ago in quiet conversations after Catherine's passing. Tom arrived just as Michael pulled into the driveway, both men entering my kitchen where the evidence of last night's failed party still lingered. The three of us gathered around my worn oak table, coffee steaming in Catherine's old mugs, while Michael laid out what he'd discovered. Sarah's been photographing your client files for months, he said, pulling out his phone. Every contract, every design specification. Her father's company was going to launch a new, innovative, home division next month, using all your methods. They thought if they ruined you at the Christmas party, made you look unstable, no one would believe you when you objected. Tom's eyes narrowed as he spread Catherine's trust documents across the table. They didn't know about these, did they? He asked, a predatory smile forming. Not a clue, Michael confirmed. Dad, they have no idea that Mom protected everything with patents. Sarah's father already pre-sold 3 homes using your designs, promising clients they could have a Wilson-style house for less. Tom's fingers danced across his laptop keyboard, pulling up patent law websites. This is beautiful, he murmured. Catherine didn't just protect the designs. She created a cascading trust structure. Every innovation you've made since her death automatically falls under the same protection. Those pre-sold houses? They can't legally build them without your approval. The moment they try, we can file federal patent infringement charges. Michael leaned forward, his tie loosened, looking more like my son than he had in months. There's more, he said quietly. Sarah's father's company is leveraged to the hilt. They took out massive loans based on projected earnings from their innovative division. If they can't deliver those pre-sold houses, Tom's smile widened. They'll default. Their entire company could collapse. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen windows, catching the dust motes in its beam as we crafted our response. Tom outlined the legal strategy. First, a cease and desist letter regarding the stolen designs, followed by patent infringement notices to every contractor and supplier in their network. By noon, no one in the industry will touch their projects, he promised. By dinner, their loans will be under review. Michael added his own piece to the puzzle. I've documented everything. Sarah's photo sessions in Dad's office, her brother bragging about the plan at the country club, even recordings of her father discussing how they destroy your reputation. I was gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. When I saw her spike your wine last night. His voice trailed off, emotion finally cracking through his professional facade. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped them sooner. I reached across the table and gripped his hand, feeling the same calluses that marked him as my son. You did exactly what your mother would have done, I said softly. You gathered evidence, protected the foundation, and waited for the right moment to bring down the whole corrupt structure. Tom began preparing the legal documents, his printer humming in the background like a well-tuned engine. Robert, he said, looking up from his work, you realize this isn't just about stopping them. With these patents, you could demand compensation for every design they copied, every contract they interfered with. We're talking millions in damages. The number hung in the air like sawdust in sunlight, but it wasn't the money that made me smile. It was the knowledge that Catherine, my quiet, wise Catherine, had seen this coming. She built a legal fortress around our life's work, knowing that someday someone would try to steal not just our business, but our son's soul. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the winter sun climb higher, feeling the weight of Catherine's letter in my pocket and the strength of my son's renewed loyalty beside me. In a few hours, Sarah and her family would learn that their perfect plan had been built on a foundation of sand, while our defense was crafted from something far stronger. A mother's love turned into corporate steel. Tom's printer produced the final documents with a satisfying finality. Ready to sign? He asked, holding out his pen. I took it, feeling the same certainty I'd felt when signing my first building permit decades ago. Some signatures change everything. And this one was about to teach Sarah's family that true craftsmanship, whether in homes or revenge, requires a master's touch. Tom's legal documents landed like precision-guided missiles at exactly 9 o'clock on Christmas morning. The first cease and desist letter arrived at Sarah's father's office by priority courier, requiring a signature that would prove he received it. The second batch went to every contractor, supplier, and building inspector in 3 counties, informing them that any use of Wilson Custom Homes' patented designs would result in immediate legal action. The third, most devastating document was delivered to their company's main financial backer. A formal notice of patent infringement, including proof that they had pre-sold homes using stolen intellectual property. Michael, monitoring his phone, narrated the fallout in real time as texts and calls exploded across his screen. Sarah's having a complete meltdown, he reported, reading her frantic messages. She says her father just got the papers and well, those words aren't very Christmas-like. The first panicked call hit my phone at 9:30. Sarah's father, his usual smooth confidence replaced by barely controlled terror. Robert, there must be some mistake. We can discuss this like businessmen. I let it ring through to voicemail just as Tom had advised. The second call came from their company's lawyer, voice trembling as he left a message about significant financial implications and urgent need for dialogue. By 10 o'clock, the situation had escalated exactly as we'd planned. Sarah's brother burst into their family's Christmas breakfast, waving his phone and shouting about bank notifications. Their construction loans, based on those pre-sold homes, were under immediate review. Michael's phone buzzed constantly with updates from industry contacts. Their suppliers are already backing out, he said, a note of professional admiration in his voice. Nobody wants to risk patent litigation. Every contract they had lined up is dissolving. Sarah's texts grew increasingly desperate. Michael, please? Daddy's investment partners are calling. Everything's falling apart. At 11, their company's stock price began to drop as word spread through the industry. Tom called with an update that made me smile for the first time since last night's wine incident. Their biggest client just canceled a $20 million development contract. Apparently, they don't want to be associated with patent thieves. The mighty Andersons, who had thought they could simply steal and replicate my life's work, were watching their business empire crumble in real time on Christmas morning. Around noon, Sarah herself appeared at my front door, her designer outfit from last night replaced by hastily thrown-on casual clothes, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. She rang the doorbell repeatedly, each chime more frantic than the last. Through my workshop window, I watched her pace on my porch, alternating between calling my phone and Michael's. Daddy's having chest pains? She cried into my voicemail. Please, we'll do anything. Just call off the lawyers. But I remembered how she had planned to poison my wine, to destroy my reputation, to steal everything I'd built. Her tears now meant as little to me as my dignity had meant to her. Michael, sitting beside me in the workshop, ignored her calls with the same resolve I'd taught him to use when checking lumber for hidden flaws. By 1 o'clock, their entire carefully constructed plan had collapsed like a house built without proper foundations. Sarah's father's company stock had dropped 60%. Their loans were being called in for emergency review. Contractors were publicly distancing themselves. And through it all, I sat in my workshop, running my hands over smooth wood, listening to the symphony of their desperation playing through our ignored phones. "Dad," Michael said quietly, "they're finished. Everything they tried to steal, every plan they made, it's all falling apart." I nodded, feeling Catherine's presence in the winter sunlight streaming through my workshop windows. The phones kept ringing, each call more desperate than the last, but their panic felt distant now, like a storm passing far away. In my pocket, Catherine's letter crinkled softly, reminding me that sometimes the best revenge isn't built with hammers and nails, but with patience, patents, and the quiet power of a mother's foresight. As the chaos of Christmas Day faded into evening, I packed a single duffel bag with simple necessities: my favorite flannel shirt, worn jeans, and Catherine's old photo album. The workshop was clean and quiet, tools hung in their proper places, everything orderly as I'd always taught Michael a craftsman's space should be. On my workbench, I left 2 envelopes. One for Michael, containing a key to Catherine's lake cabin and instructions to meet me there when the dust settled, and one for Tom, giving him full authority to handle the legal aftermath. The note I taped to my front door was simple: "Gone to check on an old foundation. Back when the weather clears." Sarah and her family wouldn't understand the message, but Michael would remember the cabin Catherine and I had built together 30 years ago, our secret retreat 3 hours north in the pine woods. The winter air bit cold and clean as I loaded my truck, the stars above bright as nail heads in new lumber. My phone, still buzzing with desperate messages from the Andersons, went into my workshop drawer. Some conversations require distance to gain proper perspective, just like you have to step back to see if a wall is truly straight. The drive north felt like shedding heavy weights with each mile marker. City lights faded behind me, replaced by snow-covered fields and forests wearing winter white like fresh paint. I stopped at a small diner just after midnight, the kind of place where coffee comes in thick ceramic mugs and the waitress calls everyone honey without irony. The television above the counter was playing local news, including a brief story about Sarah's father's company's stock collapse. Even here, 3 hours from home, the aftershocks of our Christmas morning earthquake were still rippling. But in this warm, simple space, smelling of coffee and apple pie, their financial disaster felt as distant as summer rain. The cabin appeared exactly as it had when I'd last visited, its solid log walls standing straight against the winter wind, just as Catherine and I had built them. Every beam, every board held memories of working together, planning our future, teaching Michael to appreciate honest craftsmanship. The porch creaked its familiar welcome as I carried my bag inside. No crystal wine glasses here, no designer furniture or social pretensions. Just solid oak tables I'd made myself, comfortable chairs built to last generations, and windows Catherine had insisted on making extra large to let the forest Indiana. That first night, I sat on the porch in Catherine's old rocking chair, watching snow fall soft as whispered secrets. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke from the fireplace, so different from Sarah's expensive perfume. In the distance, an owl called, its voice carrying across the frozen lake like nature's timekeeper. My phone was 50 miles away in my workshop drawer, probably still lighting up with messages from people discovering that true wealth isn't built on stolen designs and borrowed reputation. Here, wealth was measured in simpler things: the solid feel of hand-hewn logs, the warmth of a fire built with wood I'd cut myself, the deep quiet of a winter night unmarred by city noise or social complications. I pulled Catherine's letter from my pocket, reading it one more time by lamplight. Her words about protecting our legacy felt different here, where we'd first dreamed of building something lasting. Tomorrow, I would split more firewood, check the cabin's foundation, maybe start carving the new walking stick I'd been planning. Simple tasks, honest work, the kind that leaves your hands tired but your conscience clean. In my mind, I could picture the chaos unfolding back in the city. Sarah's father facing his investors, their company's stock continuing its death spiral, contractors scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. But here, in this place Catherine and I had built with love and honest labor, their problems felt as insubstantial as smoke rising from my chimney. Michael knew where to find me when the time was right. Until then, I had wood to work, quiet to keep, and peace to rediscover. The snow continued falling, covering my truck's tracks, erasing signs of my arrival just as time would eventually erase the wounds of betrayal. Some distances aren't measured in miles, but in the space between who people pretend to be and who they really are. I had chosen my space, this cabin, these woods, the simple truth of things built to last. After a week of peaceful exile at the cabin, I finally drove into the small town nearby to check my messages at the local diner. Mary, the waitress who'd been serving coffee there for 30 years, handed me a thick envelope that Michael had sent care of the diner's address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from back home, and as I read it over my morning coffee, the taste of justice was sweeter than Mary's homemade pie. Sarah's father's company had completely imploded. Their stock, once trading at $80 a share, had plummeted to less than $5. The 3 pre-sold homes, marketed as innovative Wilson-style designs, had triggered lawsuits from buyers demanding their deposits back. But the real earthquake was happening in Sarah's perfect world. Michael's detailed letter painted a picture of complete collapse. Her father had been forced to resign as CEO after the board discovered he had knowingly authorized the use of stolen patents. Their family's country club membership had been revoked, a polite letter citing concerns about business ethics as the reason. Sarah's carefully curated social media accounts, once full of designer clothes and charity galas, had gone dark after former friends started commenting about patent thieves and wine poisoners on her posts. The karma continued to unfold in Michael's careful handwriting. Sarah's brother, the one who had smirked through our Christmas dinner, was facing potential criminal charges for his role in photographing confidential business documents. Their mother had been asked to resign from 3 charity boards, her presence now considered problematic for fundraising. The construction industry, which operated largely on trust and reputation, had completely blacklisted their entire family. Even their lawyers had withdrawn representation, citing irreconcilable ethical concerns. But the most satisfying detail was about Sarah herself. She had apparently shown up at Michael's office, wearing last season's clothes and smudged makeup, begging him to intervene. "The country club won't even take my calls," she had cried. "My credit cards are maxed out. Daddy's company can't pay my car lease. Michael, please, make your father stop." My son, showing the backbone I'd always known he had simply replied, "Stop what?" "The natural consequences of your own actions." Mary brought me a second cup of coffee as I read about the 3 banks that were now reviewing all loans to Sarah's father's company. Without the projected income from their stolen design division, they couldn't meet their debt obligations. Their headquarters building, that glass and steel monument to borrowed prestige, was already listed for sale. Michael had included a photo. The same building where Sarah had once mocked my work boots now bore a for sale sign larger than their company logo. Tom had added his own note, detailing how our patents had become a noose around their financial neck. Every attempt to save their company required our approval, which would never come. They had tried to steal my designs, thinking they were just taking houseplants. Instead, they had triggered the collapse of their entire paper empire. Sarah's father, once so proud of his business acumen, was now taking meetings in coffee shops because he couldn't afford to maintain his office. The final page of Michael's letter contained a transcript of a voicemail Sarah had left at my office. Her voice, once so polished and condescending, now trembled with desperation. "Robert, please. Everything's gone. Daddy's company is bankrupt. Our house is being foreclosed. My friends won't take my calls. Even my favorite boutique denied my credit card. I know what we did was wrong. The wine, the patents, everything. Just, please call us back. Tell us what you want. Name your price." As I folded the letter, Mary refilled my coffee cup one last time. "Bad news?" she asked, noting my expression. I smiled, watching the winter sun glint off the snow outside. "No, Mary. Just watching what happens when people build houses on sand instead of stone." Just then her ancient diner phone rang. Mary answered, listened, then held out the receiver. "For you, Robert. Woman crying, says she's your daughter-in-law." I stood up, leaving enough cash to cover my coffee and a generous tip. "Tell her I'm still checking old foundations, Mary. Some people need to learn that not everything in life can be fixed with Daddy's money." After 2 weeks of peaceful exile, Michael's message finally convinced me to return. "They're camping outside my office every day, Dad. Sarah looks like she hasn't slept in weeks. Her father's hands shake when he holds his coffee cup. Maybe it's time to hear them out." I agreed to meet at Pete's hardware store, the same place where I'd bought my first tools 40 years ago. The kind of place Sarah had once deemed too provincial for her tastes. I arrived early, breathing in the honest smell of fresh lumber and metal, running my hands over smooth wooden handles of hammers lined up like soldiers. Pete himself, now in his 80s, nodded from behind the counter where he still sharpened tools by hand. At exactly 10 o'clock they walked in. The change in them was shocking. Sarah wore no makeup, her designer clothes replaced by wrinkled department store clearance items that hung loose on her thin frame. Her father, once so imposing in his tailored suits, now wore khakis with a coffee stain on the sleeve. Gone was the arrogant strut, replaced by the cautious step of people who had learned gravity works in more ways than one. Even Sarah's brother, trailing behind them, had lost his perpetual smirk, his eyes now carrying the haunted look of someone who discovered karma has a mean right hook. They found me in the lumber aisle, where the scent of fresh-cut pine provided more warmth than their presence. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached toward me, her French manicure chipped and grown out. "Robert," she whispered, her voice rough from crying, "thank you for meeting us." Her father cleared his throat, the sound echoing off the high metal shelves. "Mr. Wilson, we've lost everything. The company is in receivership. Our house goes to auction next week. Sarah and Michael." He paused, swallowing hard. "They're divorcing. All our friends, our social connections, they've abandoned us. But that's not why we're here." He stopped, his business-trained voice cracking. Sarah stepped forward, tears tracking down her hollow cheeks. "We're here because we were cruel. Incredibly, unforgivably cruel. The wine at Christmas. Trying to steal your designs. Thinking we could just take what you spent a lifetime building. We were monsters." Her brother, for once silent, stared at his scuffed designer shoes. All his previous confidence evaporated like morning dew. Pete's ancient radio played soft country music in the background as Sarah continued, each word seeming to cost her physical pain. "I thought I was so much better than this," she gestured at the hardware store around us. "Better than honest work and calloused hands. But now I understand. Everything you built, every house, every relationship, it was all real. Our world, our fancy parties and social climbing, it was all fake. As fake as my love for Michael." Her father stepped forward, his shoulders stooped under an invisible weight. "The patents, they weren't just legal documents, were they? They were your wife's way of protecting not just the business but your values. Your legacy." I ran my finger along a piece of oak, feeling its grain, letting them continue. Sarah's brother finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "The company's bankruptcy hearings start next week. We'll probably face criminal charges for the patent theft. But worse than that, we've lost our dignity. The one thing you never lost even when we tried to take everything else." Pete appeared at the end of the aisle, pretending to organize drill bits while keeping a protective eye on me. Sarah made one final plea, her designer purse now replaced by a canvas tote from a discount store. "Robert, please. We'll sign anything you want. Transfer any assets we have left. Just tell us how to make this right." Her father added, his voice heavy with defeat, "We know we can never repay what we tried to steal. Not just the designs but your son's respect. Your family's unity. We destroyed ourselves trying to destroy you." The morning sun filtered through Pete's dusty windows, catching the motes in its beam, as I considered their broken figures standing in this temple of honest work. Catherine's letter crinkled in my pocket, her wisdom still guiding me even now. Pete's radio crackled with static before settling on an old country song about redemption and second chances. Sarah's tears fell on the concrete floor, mixing with sawdust and time. Her father's hands, soft from decades of office work, gripped a shelf for support. Her brother stared at a display of work gloves as if seeing them for the first time. They waited, these fallen social climbers, in the humble cathedral of a hardware store, for the judgment of a man they had once thought too simple to fear. I took a deep breath, smelling pine and possibility, considering what Catherine would say about mercy and justice. I picked up a piece of rough lumber from the nearby stack, running my hands over its unfinished surface as I spoke. "Forgiveness is like this wood," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You can't just paint over the rough spots and call it finished. It takes time, proper tools, and honest effort to make it smooth." Sarah and her family stood silent, hanging on every word. "Here's how this works. First, understand that trust, like a good foundation, has to be rebuilt from the ground up. No shortcuts, no quick fixes." I set down the lumber and faced them directly. "Sarah, you'll withdraw your divorce petition. Instead, you and Michael will attend marriage counseling, not at some fancy clinic, but with Pastor Jim who helped raise him after Catherine died. You'll live within your means in a small apartment, working whatever honest jobs you can find. No more social climbing, no more pretending to be something you're not." Her father started to speak, but I held up my hand. "You, Mr. Anderson, will publicly admit to the patent theft. Not through your lawyers, but in person at a construction industry meeting. You'll acknowledge that your success was built on stealing other people's work. Then you'll spend one day a week helping at my job sites, learning what real building means. Not as a boss, but as a laborer carrying lumber and cleaning up sites. Sarah's brother shifted uncomfortably as I turned to him. You'll volunteer at the trade school where I teach weekend workshops. Show young builders how corporate greed nearly destroyed your family. Make your mistakes mean something. I pulled Catherine's letter from my pocket, letting them see it but not touch it. My wife knew this day might come. She protected our business not to punish people but to teach them. Now it's your turn to learn. The terms continued, each one designed not to humiliate but to rebuild. They would attend family dinners at my house once a month, eating simple food at my old table, learning to value substance over style. They would help with community projects, building homes for people who couldn't afford them. Every nail you hammer, every board you carry, will remind you that real worth isn't measured in stock prices or country club memberships. Sarah wiped tears with her sleeve, no designer handkerchief in sight. The legal consequences of your actions will continue. The bankruptcy, the professional fallout, those are your lessons to learn. But if you follow these terms, if you demonstrate genuine change through actions not words, then maybe we can build something new from these ashes. The morning light filtered through Pete's shop windows as they absorbed my conditions. One more thing, I added, picking up a set of work gloves from a nearby shelf. Every Christmas Eve, instead of fancy parties and poison wine, you'll help me build something for a family in need. We'll work through the night if necessary, creating something real, something that lasts. I handed the gloves to Sarah's father, whose manicured hands had never known honest labor. Your choice. Accept these terms and start rebuilding, or walk away and live with what you've become. They stood silent among the tools and lumber, surrounded by the honest smell of wood and metal. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice carrying none of its old artificial polish. We accept. All of it. Not because we have to, but because we need to. Her father nodded, holding the work gloves like they were made of gold. You're offering us something more valuable than the company we lost. You're offering us a chance to learn what real success means. Her brother, for once humble, added quietly, we don't deserve this opportunity. No, I agreed, you don't. But Catherine believed in second chances, as long as they're earned with sweat and sincerity. They nodded, understanding that this wasn't just a set of conditions. It was a blueprint for rebuilding their souls, one honest day's work at a time. 1 year after that meeting at Pete's Hardware, I stood in my workshop on Christmas Eve, watching Sarah and her father unload lumber from my old truck. They wore worn work clothes now, their hands rough from months of honest labor. The night air was crisp with winter's bite as we prepared for our annual tradition, building furniture for families in need. Sarah's brother was already inside, carefully sanding a child's desk he'd been working on all week, his former smirk replaced by the focused expression of someone who had discovered the satisfaction of creating something real. Through my window, I watched Michael help his wife position a board for cutting, their movements showing the easy rhythm of people who had relearned how to work together. The past 12 months had tested them exactly as I'd intended. They'd lived simply, worked hard, and faced their consequences without complaint. Sarah had found a job as a receptionist at the trade school, answering phones with genuine humility. Her father, now known around construction sites as Pete's apprentice, had earned respect not through power but through his willingness to learn from those he once looked down on. Inside, my workshop smelled of fresh-cut pine and coffee from the thermos Sarah brought each week, the same way Catherine used to during our early building days. The Christmas tree in the corner held ornaments they'd made themselves, simple wooden stars and angels carved during our evening lessons. Michael and Sarah's marriage counseling with Pastor Jim had rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of truth instead of social climbing. They lived in a small apartment now, cooking simple meals and discovering that love grows stronger when stripped of pretense. Tonight, they worked side by side on a rocking chair for a single mother's Christmas gift, their quiet conversation punctuated by gentle laughter that held none of its old artificial polish. Sarah's father, reviewing building plans with the same attention he once gave to stock reports, had found peace in creating rather than taking. Even her brother, who now taught weekend workshops about business ethics at the trade school, had discovered that true respect is earned through actions, not acquisitions. As midnight approached, I watched them all working together in my workshop, their faces lit by the warm glow of old work lamps. They weren't the same people who had plotted with poison wine a year ago. These were people who had been broken and rebuilt, like houses after a storm, stronger for the experience. Sarah caught my eye and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes as she held up the finished rocking chair for inspection. "What do you think?" she asked, running her hand over the smooth wood with genuine pride. "Catherine would have loved it," I said quietly, and for the first time speaking my wife's name in front of them felt right. Tomorrow we would deliver these handmade gifts to families across town, each piece carrying the silent signature of redemption. But tonight, in this sacred space of sawdust and second chances, I felt Catherine's presence in every hammer strike and saw her wisdom in every measured cut. Some wounds, like some woods, grow stronger in the broken places when mended with care and time. Looking back now, 2 years after that Christmas Eve of poisoned wine and hidden truths, I understand something every builder learns. Sometimes the strongest structures rise from complete demolition. When Sarah tried to destroy my dignity with a tainted glass, when her family plotted to steal my life's work, they thought they were tearing down a simple old man's legacy. Instead, they destroyed their own false foundation, clearing ground for authentic reconstruction. Each day since then has been like setting a new beam, laying fresh mortar, creating relationships built on respect rather than pretense. The transformation runs deeper than their changed circumstances. It lives in Sarah's honest smile when she masters a new woodworking skill, in her father's quiet pride when a family loves a home he helped build, in her brother's passionate warnings to young entrepreneurs about the cost of stolen success. They've learned what Catherine knew all along. True wealth isn't measured in social status or designer labels, but in the strength of bonds forged through shared purpose and genuine effort. If you're watching this and feeling pressured to maintain appearances, if you're struggling under the weight of false pride or borrowed prestige, remember this. Dignity isn't inherited or purchased, it's built, like any worthy structure, through unwavering commitment to truth. Sometimes love requires letting people hit rock bottom so they can discover their own foundation. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply standing firm in your principles, letting others crash against them until they understand their own hollow core. My story isn't about punishment or power, but about the unshakable strength that comes from knowing your own worth. If this message resonates in your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of authenticity triumphing over artifice. Share in the comments where you're watching from and how you've maintained your integrity in a world that often values shine over substance. Because ultimately, we're all builders of something, whether it's homes, relationships, or character. And the only foundation worth having is one anchored in truth, reinforced by wisdom, and tested by time.